Well, I'll go ahead and start the special meeting of the RHA board for June 17th at 12 o'clock to discuss a resolution pertaining to a Section 18 application for Heritage Park. Gwen, you want to do roll call?
Yes, I'll do roll call and then I'll call Arnie. Eric Braun.
Here.
Valerie Crutchfield is not on. Susan Ellinger.
Here.
Nia Fonville Swint is not on. Arnie Morris is not on yet. Bahati Matisia is not on. Greg Warren. Greg Warren.
Yes.
Is on.
Yes.
Sorry,
Can you
couldn't
hear
hear
me?
you. Joe Whitehouse.
Yes, I'm here.
Yolanda Winstead is not on. We don't have a quorum. I'm going to call Arnie.
So if we waited and had more time to submit the application, is there anything that we need to do to make the application better, or is it in fine shape to submit right now?
It is out for comment for Ashley's review, as well as our consultant, Rod Solomon, who's been working with us. So I would imagine that there will be maybe some minor changes, but I don't think that, Ashley, correct me if I'm wrong here. I don't think that there's anything that's going to be materially different.
All right, Arnie's in the car. He's going to jump on real quick.
Ashley, do you disagree?
You may not. I can hear you. Maybe for some reason. Ashley, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Oh, Kenya asked a question.
Do you think that, I know that it's out for review for comment for both, the application for comment from both you and Rod. Do you think that there will be anything that will be materially different from what we have in front of both you and Rod?
Yeah, no, nothing material. I've just noticed some minor areas where there may just be some inconsistency in numbers that just need to be corrected.
The resolution before us really doesn't go into that level of detail. That's, we don't have the application attached to it. So I think any modest changes are just more administrative in nature, not a board matter.
Correct.
All right, I am on the call.
Yeah, Arnie's on. So we have our quorum.
Hey, Arnie, we just started talking about the application process, so you haven't missed anything.
Okay, and I apologize.
No worries. I guess this is Kenya's show, or Kenya, do you want to go into the?
Yeah, I think.
Greg, give us a second, Greg. I'm getting going. Kenya's gonna, I think, do a presentation on the resolution for us.
Yeah, there were some other sections. Do we need to go through those as far as what was on the agenda, Gwen, or is it okay for me to just go?
Yeah, I think it's okay. Ashley, you didn't have any report, did you?
No, essentially what I said earlier about the change in schedule is what I was going to report, but that was it.
We do not have any public on. No.
Yeah, it doesn't look like we have any members of the public, but I'll ask just in case if there's any members of the public that want to make any comments. Hearing none, we'll move to the next item.
Okay. So I'll make this brief. This resolution that is before the board today is very similar to the resolution that we was presented and that was approved and adopted, resolution 37, which was the authority for us to proceed with the Section 18 application. At that time, we had done a series of outreach to the community, both residents and the broader community. And subsequent to that resolution being adopted, We did have some additional outreach, and so this is really procedural according to the regulations. The board resolution must be the last item, and so it must be occur after all of the outreach has been completed. What has really happened from the time when 37 was adopted to what's being presented to the board today was the recognition of us wanting to really reach every single household. So we had an email campaign. We offered in-person meetings. We offered virtual meeting options. We sent out summary information, and information was also posted on our website. But recognizing the importance of the reaching every single resident and understanding that not everyone has email or is tech savvy to receive things via email or on the website. We sent out a written letter to all the residents, basically, which was a recap of the other presentation materials that we had. We sent in a letter, and that went out to every single household with our relocation staff having that going door to door. Additionally, we did have outreach with our inter-community council. But the HUD regulation is very specific and calls out the resident advisory board. In the case of the Raleigh Housing Authority, the resident advisory board is the inter-community council. So a petition was sent out to residents inviting them to participate in the resident advisory board. That's something that's done as part of our annual plan, as part of our 5-year plan. There were no responses as such under the authority given to the RHA. We are able to appoint members to that, and we appointed the inter-community council as the resident advisory board. And just to make sure that we were following the letter of the law, we held a separate meeting specifically with the resident advisory board where we shared information with the resident advisory board about Section 18 application for Heritage Park, as well as the relocation. The meeting was well received, and there was no opposition to no opposition or no questions from that body. And so
Hey, Kenya, how many people, how many residents from Heritage Park serve on the inter-community council?
So the inter-community council is made up of just of the elected council presidents. So there's only one council president at Heritage Park. And not every.
And what you said before was you've tried to establish a resident community council and there hasn't been sufficient interest among residents to create one. Is that what I heard, or is that accurate?
That's accurate. The resident advisory board can be anyone. It doesn't have to just be the elected members of the property related president council. So it can be anyone can serve on that body.
But typically it's residents of the property would be on the resident advisory board.
Right. So the resident advisory board is not just Heritage Park. The resident advisory board is broad across all of our, including our housing choice voucher residents. Everyone is invited to participate in that. So it's not specific to Heritage Park.
Oh, I thought each community had like a resident advisory board. Do they typically do that and we just don't have enough? Sorry if I'm going. I just want to make sure
No,
for the record. I just want to make sure for the record it's clear why we're doing what we're doing. And we've given the residents an opportunity to create this board and they haven't there hasn't been enough interest, is what I'm gathering. If
Yeah,
that's
so
accurate.
Let me answer that, Kenya.
sure.
So typically the organizations, the resident organizations at the property level, or for Section 8, those would be resident councils that represent the residents of their of specific sites. The resident advisory board, there are kind of two, or at least two versions that are recognized by HUD. One is more typical, which is the leadership of the presidents of the resident councils forming the resident advisory board, which is an agency-wide body that represents residents. Now, we do not have such a resident advisory board. We do have an inter-community council, which by membership is sort of like the resident advisory board, but it's not the advisory board. The other version of the resident advisory board that HUD recognizes is that housing authorities can, at times when there are important decisions to be made, like this one, or the annual plan, the housing authority can invite residents to a meeting, and that the folks who show up and sign in constitute the resident advisory board at that time for that specific situation. So that's kind of what Kenya did, was to convene a group of residents to constitute the resident advisory board for this purpose. So, and the reason there's this second opportunity is that over the years, HUD has realized that housing authorities have great difficulty, nurturing resident councils, and and making sure that there are resident councils and resident advisory boards, because it takes a lot of administrative effort to make that work.
Okay, that's all very helpful. So thank you, Kenya.
Yeah, thank you.
This is Greg. In the very early years of discussions of Heritage Park, there were some community members expressing concern over the plan. And I'm wondering if we still heard those voices most recently in your efforts to kind of publicize this effort.
So as it relates specifically to the residents at Heritage Park, I think that there has been a more positive response to the plan for a couple of reasons. One is, I think we have been, really intentional in our outreach and creating as many opportunities for residents as possible for residents to be heard, and really taking that feedback into consideration. And I think we heard some of that during our design workshop. Some of that positive feedback was shared where they feel, I think, a little more hopeful about the process. And I think some of it was just, fear of the unknown, but also they didn't feel like they were being heard. And so I think we've really been trying to be responsive to that. And so I think the feedback has been more positive. I will also say now we're at a different point, right? So one, we actually do have at least a designed plan and at least an initial concept. So I think that shows to the residents some progress. And I think two, we're at a very, very different point where we are actually starting to talk about relocation and providing relocation options to residents and explaining what those benefits are. The meeting that we had the resident meeting that we had in May, the in-person meeting, I think, was one of the strongest turnouts that we've had in some time. There are 98 households And I think at the time we had around 30 folks participate in that meeting. And then we had a few participate in our virtual options. But, you know, we don't have anyone present from our project-based voucher or our housing operations team, but I can tell you that there's been a lot of questions and activity and interest from the residents at the management office, and then also in connecting with our relocation team. I don't know, Ashley, if you have anything that you want to add to that.
Yeah, no, I agree. You know, with you, the residents have been very positive, especially the meeting that focused on relocation. It was a very you know, the residents just had a lot of questions and were also pleased with what they heard about you know, the relocation benefits that they will receive and the options that they're going to receive, and you know, and a high level of interest in among some of moving earlier rather than later.
Mhm.
So that was by far the most positive meeting that I had been in involving residents, because there were I don't recall a single you know, negative or a piece of criticism in that meeting at all. There was, you know, one person who was a non-resident who typically makes you know, comments at our meetings, and he didn't make any comment, and the meeting was really well done, and the residents appreciated what they heard.
Any
Some
other
of the,
questions?
I was really referring to the external folks rather than residents, because we did have some of those folks really concerned about this early on, but I gather that you've not heard from some of those interests as we move forward.
No, there has been some questions and some concerns that have been raised by some outside groups, and we are addressing those as they do come up. I think there have been some things that I think have been taken out of context by those groups, and so we've had outreach to those groups one-on-one, and are planning to have a written response to address some things that they've stated.
Okay.
And that's been,
And I noted,
I think that's been the typical group that has historically had negative comments about the housing authority. Would that be accurate? It's kind of the same group
Mhm,
that continues to
mhm.
raise issues. Okay.
Yeah.
well, but we're also clear that the city's supportive of this approach because the mayor signed some sort of proclamation, right? That's mentioned in the resolution.
That's correct. The mayor has signed a letter of support, and throughout this entire process, we've been speaking with council members one-on-one and having conversations with them, particularly council member Harrison, which represents this district, and making sure that they are up to speed and sharing information with them in real time, both on things that we're putting that we're sending out, and also the feedback that we're getting.
Right. Transparency is really important in communication.
I agree.
Other questions from anyone else?
This is Greg. How long will it take HUD to approve this Section 18 application? And what can we do while we wait for approval?
The estimated time is 60 to 90 days. And in that time, we're gonna continue to be working with the residents on a variety of fronts. So we have Laura McCann, who's going to be the director of our relocation team. And that team has expanded where she's added some staff. And the plan is to add at least 1 to 2 more people to be a part of that team. And so we will be working with residents to survey them on their needs and to get feedback on, what they would like to do in terms of whether they, what they're evaluating their relocation options and where they would like to go. And to see if folks would like to be early movers. As I think we have stated, our project-based voucher units will provide options to these residents. And so we do have some that are going to be coming online this summer where we would like to take advantage of that. But then we're going to continue to work with residents and also private owners to try to find as many relocation options for our residents as possible.
We won't get tenant protection vouchers until the Section 18 application is approved, or is that a later stage?
Yeah, so we can apply for the the tenant protection vouchers once the application is approved.
And so if folks move out earlier, that'll mean less tenant protection vouchers that we can get, right? It's only based on existing residents.
So we will, yes. So we will be eligible for tenant protection vouchers based on the occupied units at the time of application. And occupied units are all units that are occupied or had been occupied within 24 months of the application. So, there have been units that are not, that are outside of that 24 months. And so it may be, around 10. So we will get vouchers for all of the units that meet that occupied definition, regardless of when people move and when the application is approved. Now, for those units that we will not get a tenant protection voucher, we will in the end be eligible for so-called RAD vouchers that will cover those units. But in the end, we will have 122 units of subsidy, the vast majority of that being tenant protection vouchers.
Yeah.
Hey, but I don't want to, I think these are good questions. I'd like to, if possible, if we could take a vote on the resolution before Arnie drops off so he can have his vote, and then we can continue with some of the questions, if that's okay.
Fine.
Okay. I know it would be a yes vote if Arnie drops off, but I'd rather him vote while he's present. And so with that, I'll make a motion that we approve, I think it's resolution number 40.
And I'll second it.
All right, Eric Braun,
Yes.
Susan Ellinger,
Yes.
Arnie Morris,
Yes.
Greg Warren,
Yes. Hi, John.
Joe Whitehouse.
Yes.
Resolution number 40 has been adopted.
Okay. And so please, Greg, if you have additional questions, go ahead, or anyone else for that matter.
I don't.
Okay. I thought I heard you might have one. So anyone else have questions, or Kenya or Ashley, do you have anything else you want to share with us about the process that we ought to know since we're on the call?
So
I have one. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I thought you were.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that one of the provisions relating to Section 18 is that the the provisions of the URA, the Uniform Relocation Act, do not apply to Section 18 dispositions. And we have stated that in our documents, but indicated that we will abide by the URA. So it's just sort of a technical point about whether the URA applies or not, but the larger point, which was missed by one of the questions that we had been asked. The larger point that we wanted to make is that we will meet the requirements of the URA and exceed them. So our relocation benefits, will be more generous than what's required by the URA. So,
And Ashley, when you say meet the URA, you just mean specifically the URA payments.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
just the URA payment amount, not the full URA.
No, there are different set of standards for relocation requirements, not just payments, for that apply to dispositions, but they overlap with the URA. But just as a technical point, housing authorities don't have to meet the requirements of the URA. They have to meet the alternative requirements, which we do, which we will meet. But sometimes within advocacy communities, there's adherence to URA and the requirements to the URA. And so in our relocation plan, we make it clear that we will provide relocation benefits that are beyond the URA. For example, the URA standards are not adjusted for any inflation. We will adjust for inflation. So that's just the law regarding Section 18 does have requirements for relocation, but it's not the URA.
Hey, Ashley, a little bit off the point. I think it may be worth you and Kenya talking to Mac about, and maybe you already have, about filing the rezoning application now that we have kind of these scenarios. And it may be, and again, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, it may be maybe good timing to start putting the application together. Nothing's going to happen until the election anyway at this point, but it might help with some of the discussions going on around the closure of South Street to kind of start thinking about the rezoning application and even having some preliminary discussions with some of the council members. But I just raise it for you to confer with Mac on it if you haven't. Maybe you've already talked to him about it, and that's fine.
Yeah, we have talked to Mac about, the timing of the application. I think that what we are evaluating is whether or not we even need to go through a rezoning. So technically, our first phase, I will say, what we have planned, at least for the first phase at this point, preliminarily, the initial concept doesn't require a rezone, and we can build as of right.
And that's partly because of the new transit overlay, I suspect.
That's correct. And I think we would
Okay.
be the first group to actually use that TOD overlay. So I think that people would be excited that we were utilizing that TOD overlay. For the balance of the site moving forward, we would need to potentially do a rezoning. And I just think this is, you know, this is something that we need to, I think, discuss more broadly is, you know, making sure that we're not leaving anything on the table. And so even if we're not planning to go, you know, we're surrounded by a 7-story on to the west of us, and to the north of us, we're is a 20-story building. Even if we are not planning in our concept plan to go up to 20 stories, do we want to give ourselves some flexibility, especially considering there might be those opportunities with the abandonment of the cloverleaf? Do we want to leave ourselves some flexibility and maximize value, and to rezone to something other than what we can build to currently? I would think the answer would be yes, but we don't have to do it right now. But that's something that we would come back to this body to discuss.
I think that I agree with, but I think also another reason to think about doing it sooner rather than later are with all the stuff going on with the amphitheater and things, we might have an opportunity to lock in some commitments with the city that they might not otherwise be willing to commit to. And so just we don't need to talk about it now. I just think y'all might want to talk through it with Mac and the consultants and see if there might be an opportunity to take advantage of some of those issues and get some benefits, you know, finalized, or, you know, in a rezoning case or a development agreement or whatever you guys are going to do. That's the only thing. And again, I don't want to prolong this meeting. I just want to take the opportunity to raise that. I think it's worth a discussion.
Yeah, and that's it. And just to piggyback on you, I was glad you brought up the development agreement. That was in our consultation with Mac. That was kind of like the suggested route. And so he is working on a term sheet for a development agreement with the city. And so, you know, at the appropriate time, we would come back to discuss that, but it's right now it's just a draft term sheet that he's working on that will take into consideration all of those moving parts, and to really try to, you know, capitalize exactly like you said, Eric, on the conversations around South Street.
Okay, good. I'm glad y'all are thinking about it. So, well, anything else on this topic or related there too? Otherwise, we can call it a day and y'all can get back to doing hard work. All right, hearing none, then I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting, and thanks everybody for making time on short notice.
Thank you.
Thanks,
You guys
everyone.
have a great day.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Safe travels.
Bye-bye.